Hello, welcome to another episode of Finding the Good. I am here with Jaime Lyn, who I absolutely love and adore. I'm so excited that she's going to be a part of this series. Me and Jaime Lyn met because my fiance and her hubby are really good friends. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm so excited to see you do this. I mean, you're made for this for sure. And yes, I host a podcast called Set Apart with Jaime Lyn Wallnau, and I host a new show called The Next America, which is pretty much just declaring what the next America is and every different sphere of influence, from anti-trafficking to pro-life to Christians in the body of Christ, to government, to education, to inner cities, whatever it is, just people across the world who are a part of the solution, like God's plan on earth. And it's very solution driven, because I'm really all about that. You can't move forward without solutions. So I get to do that. And then I also am a children's book illustrator at the same time, and do art, and have been doing art full time, and am headed more towards media. So yeah, and that's what I do. And I'm married to Lance and Jay-Z, which, by the way, my husband the other day was talking about Jay-Z, but he was referring to Beyonce's Jay-Z, and I could have sworn that he was talking about your Jay-Z, but my husband doesn't call him Jay-Z. So anyways, long story short, very confusing.
Jaime Lyn today is going to be sharing a story with us that I think a lot of people struggle with this at some point or another. And I'm so excited to hear what you have to say, because Jaime Lyn is just so full of wisdom, and anytime she speaks, it's gold. And so today she's going to be talking about her experience with depression and gluttony. And so my first question is, when was the first time that you experienced depression and gluttony?
Okay, they were at different times, same time, but at different times. So growing up, I want to say depression came in, it was junior high or high school. It was at a young age. And I loved being around people. I was very outgoing. I genuinely just loved people. I didn't care if you were popular or not. I just loved you and was genuinely happy around them. So when I would get home alone at night, I would just have these really horrible spiral negative thoughts. And so I remember going to the doctor, and they were like, it's a chemical imbalance. And so they put me on medicine. So it was like this big secret of mine that I was on antidepressants. Like, my siblings didn't know growing up. And I want to say I was on them, and then it was kind of like an on and off thing. And I would never recommend this to anybody, but for me, I just didn't always take the medicine. I did in seasons of really dark heaviness, but I couldn't tell you what moment it started. I just know I battled the thought life, because our thoughts are so powerful. But I didn't grow up. I grew up knowing the Lord and in church, but I just grew up believing, oh, it's a chemical imbalance. But deep down, I was like, oh, this doesn't make sense, because I know this isn't from God, right?
Sure.
So then going into college, the freshman 15 people talk about, I had the freshman 30. And this is I was a very fit, ripped, not like bodybuilder ripped, but I was in competitive cheerleading, was very toned, very athletic, ate to fuel my body. And I got to college, and cheerleading was way different than what I was used to. It wasn't it wasn't intense. I went to a private university, and and I gained all this weight, and I didn't know what to do. So it spiraled me down into more depression and eating my emotions away. I didn't do that in high school, but in college, I started to eat, and I heard a sermon in a church in Abilene. It's the only sermon still to this day that I've heard on gluttony, by the way.
Wow.
And I'm 33. And so this was when I was in my teens still. And he was preaching, and he was talking about gluttony in America. And it was one of those tender internal moments where I was like, I'm a glutton. I had no idea. I'm hiding when I eat. I'm not happy, and I'm emotionally eating, which could be different, but gluttony was just I would just eat all the time. I mean, there was even a season where I would eat a whole lot and then throw it up. That was a very, very short window, less than 2 weeks, because I just couldn't do it anymore. But it was that bad. It was pretty intense. So a sermon helped me see that I was struggling with gluttony and didn't know it till I heard it.
Yeah, yeah. And so so would you say, like, I guess the gluttony was due to the depression? That's kind of what brought it on.
Totally. I would say gluttony was a fruit of depression. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. And is this something that you still struggle with today?
I would say no, because there was a moment, which I know we may get into later. There was a moment where I got delivered from depression. Now, gluttony, the action, it was like a whole step process. I don't know if you want me to get into that, but I would say it's so distant to me in my mind. Like, I view myself as a home, and I have a yard, and I'm in a neighborhood. So I got to the point where when I got delivered from depression, which was the root of the fruit of gluttony, gluttony, actions of gluttony stopped, but I still had the mindset. Then after the mindset and the actions were healed, I had to like lose weight because I was staring at the aftermath every day of gluttony. And for me, it was that 3-step process. So I would say gluttony, no. I mean, emotional eating, every once in a while, if I'm not thinking, I'm like, oh man, why did I eat that? I do have to be careful with, and it's not overeating, it's not eating healthy. Like, I want to go to junk food instead of a cleaner meal. And that messes with me when it's from an emotional place. But depression, I view it like, since I got delivered, it's like, I know that thing when a thought comes from, because now it's not internal anymore. So it would come from the outside, the thoughts. So now I'm like, no, I'm not opening the door. I'm not entertaining. I'm like a really good volleyball spiker in the spirit with thoughts. I'm like, no. So no, I know where that goes, and I refuse to marinate in anything that comes my way like that.
Yeah. And so who did Jesus become to you in those moments? Because I myself have dealt with depression, never gluttony. I kind of fall on the other spectrum. Like, when I was depressed, if I didn't actually know it, physically it would show, because I would just drop so much weight. And so in those moments is where Jesus became my everything. I literally needed him in those moments to pull me out of that dark place that I had went to. And so for you, who did he become in those moments?
He was so near. And the thing is, it's like, he was so near to me. He was my comforter and my friend. It makes me want to cry. I'm like, oh, he was so close to me. And I knew that this wasn't his. I knew this wasn't from him. I didn't know how to hand it to him because I didn't recognize I was holding it. I didn't know how to let go of it. I didn't understand how to overcome it. But the truth is that we're not to overcome it. He is. He's strong in it. Like, Paul boasts in his weakness. I think Paul's so cool.
Yes.
My goodness, Paul, I'm like, he's most of the New Testament, let's be real. But I'm like, Paul boasted in his weakness because he wanted people to see the Lord. And he knew that everything beautiful that he ever overcame, or all the sin nature he overcame, was Jesus only. And he wanted people to see Jesus only. And I'm like, I feel like, looking back, the moment that I was delivered from depression, it was Jesus only. And it was a moment where I had to renew my mind to get there. So he became my comforter and he became my friend, even though I was holding on to this thing.
So when I was walking through depression, because Paul is one of my favorite guys too. Like, I cannot wait to get to heaven and just be like, oh my God, there's Paul. I want to talk to Paul. So the book of Romans is always my favorite. It brings me back to when I first got saved. And I remember reading Romans and learning about the sin nature. And I'm like, oh, this is why I struggle so much, the spirit and the flesh. And so I remember just going back to the book of Romans. And I'm the type of person who, like you, I need a solution. Give me some steps. How do I get out of this? And so in Romans, it says, instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly to respond. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you. And so I just remember reading that and being like, okay, God, I don't know how I got to this place, but I'm going to fix my attention on you. I'm going to fix my gaze on you. And I know it's going to be only you that starts to transform me and take me out of that place. And how quickly, I mean, I don't know. I guess everyone is different and how long they come out of those things. But I remember fixing my gaze on God, and it was almost like instant that he took me out of that place. And so just really, really good when we place our thoughts on him. And so out of this situation and going through the depression and the gluttony, what is the good that came out of it during this time? And how did you see God's goodness?
So for me, I just recognized like I'm nothing without him.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jaime Lyn in her own strength is depressed, self-focused, filled with hatred for who God made her to be, judgmental, critical. Jaime Lyn, apart from God, does not have it together.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so he became my absolute everything. Everything. Like, he was near to the brokenhearted. He was near to me. But I mean, truly, I feel as though I think it just became real that like if I had nothing, but I just realized the value of turning my heart completely and fully to him. There's a scripture in, this is speaking to me now more than it did then, but this is a really great way to describe it. In Chronicles, it's talking about King Asa, who always followed the Lord. I love, King Asa watched the Lord deliver the enemy into his hands time and time again. Like they were a tiny little country, and he would turn his heart to the Lord for victory. And every time, he wouldn't have to do nearly anything, and the Lord would just be like, boom.
Yeah.
And then one time, King Asa took it into his own hands. And because of that, the whole country was at war for 70 years with one another. And the prophet looked at him and said, the Lord is searching throughout the earth for those whose hearts are completely and fully turned to them, to turn to him to strengthen them. But because you've done a foolish thing, you will be at war. And I realized when my heart isn't completely and fully turned to the Lord, I will be at war with myself, which will cause me to not be able to be who he made me to be and be at war with others. So when my heart is completely and fully turned to him, I will be strengthened and he will be my victory. And so that to me is super detrimental, especially in the areas of that spiritual war of gluttony and depression.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing that story. I know this will be impactful for so many people. Like I said, I think even now during, quarantine and everything that's going on, depression is so real, but we serve a God who can pull you right out of that. And so I love you sharing your story of his goodness and his hope, because through him, you can totally have all of that.
We can.